So last time we spoke about in the history of Jewish law about Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, Rambam, Maimonides, and now we're going to describe his work very, very briefly. The evolution of Jewish law up to this point was, again, we mentioned that Torah, Midrash Halakha, Mishnah, Gemara, Talmud. When we have the two types of Talmud, the one from Babylonia, one from Eretz Israel, but the Babylonian Talmud took over. Then it was a period of about 200 years of Savoraim that added anonymous material, and then the Geonim that for hundreds of years had the monopoly over the world or the Jewish world, including halakha, law, and commentary to the Talmud. And then we had independent rabbis, scholars that started working and writing and leading their communities, also issuing rulings in halakha, mainly in North Africa and Spain, and then later on in Italy and Germany as well. But the first one to write a comprehensive book of halakha was the Rif Rabbi Yitzhak al-Fasi, and a disciple of his disciples, like a talmid of Rabbi Yitzhak al-Fasi, is Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon was born in Spain in between 1135 or 1138, somewhere around that time, meaning the mid-12th century, and eventually he had to escape Spain because of the attacks of fanatic Muslims from Morocco, Muwahidin, the Moahids, escaped to Morocco, and then he got to Egypt and settled down in Egypt. Died in 1204, 1205. So lived about 70 years, but very prolific author. He refers to Hacham by the name of Rabbi Yosef Halevi ibn Megas as his teacher. He learned most of his knowledge from him. And this Rabbi Yosef Halevi ibn Megas himself is referred to as a Talmid, as a student of Rabbi Yitzhak al-Fasi. So it's a direct lineage from Rabbi Yitzhak al-Fasi to Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon. Remember that I mentioned before that the sort of the triangle, Baghdad, Fez, or North Africa, and Spain, was a very strong connection between the three, and Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon moves between Spain and Morocco, and then goes to Egypt, which was also influenced by the Babylonians. So Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon at a certain point set out to write a book of halakha that will provide answers to all your questions. Before that, he wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. At a very young age, he wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. But he says that the commentary on the Mishnah, if you recall, the Mishnah was not the final, even though it was the final work for Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but people did not study the Mishnah as a book of halakha. So Rambam says, my commentary on the Mishnah also is not halachically binding. And he says, כוונתי בחיבורה הוא לקצר ביאור ההלכה מן המשנה, ולא הייתה בו כוונתנו להשלים דין כל מצווה ולהביא כל מה שיצטרך מאיסור ומותר וחיוב ופטור. He says, all I did in my commentary on the Mishnah is to give you the bottom line of explaining the Mishnah and what is the relevant halakha for that one. But I didn't cover all of the legal literature. So he says, ראיתי גם כן, and it's important to read through his introduction. Rambam was a very, very methodical person. So methodical that I recommend to my students, to other people. I said you should read his writings, even if you don't understand everything, just to organize your brain. It's just reading the way he writes gives you a sense of order and organization. So he says, I decided, ראיתי גם כן, שהחבר חיבור יכלול כל דיני התורה ומשפטיה עד שלא יהיה דבר חסר ממנו. He said, I decided to write a book that will include all the laws of the Torah. And that's an ambitious goal, because he lives in the 12th century. You already have 1200 years of legal activity besides the Torah itself, hundreds of years and thousands of rabbis who wrote and discussed and analyzed halakha. So now he said, I'm going to write one book, one work that will encompass everything. One person is not working with a team of researchers. He doesn't have computers or anything like that. He's working alone. And he says, "אעשה בו דבר שהוא מנהגי לעשותו לעזוב זיכרון המחלוקת והמאמרים הנדחים ושלא אביא בו כי אם הלכה פסוקה." He says, I'm not going to tell you all the debates and all the disputes and things that are not eventually la halakha, that are not binding. I'm only going to provide the final bottom line. Which there are some exceptions. There are some cases where Maimonides says there is a practice to do this and that, but we don't do that, and that's the norm. That's the normative practice. He only when there's a real problem, he mentions that. Otherwise, he just says this is the law. One example is the Torah reading. We read the Torah. We finish the cycle of the Torah once a year, but at the time of Rambam, there was still a minhag to finish it once in 3.5 years. So he mentions that. He says some people do it. Ve'enu minhag pashut. It's not a widespread minhag, and some people finish every year, and that is the widespread minhag, and this is what we do, and this is what we follow. And he made this exception of mentioning other opinions because it was still prevalent, so he wanted to tell people that we're going to ignore that, override it. And he says, ושיהיה החיבור ההוא כולל כל דיני תורת משה, מה שצריך בזמן הגלות ומה שאיננו צריך. And that is a decision that maybe made it difficult for the book to be accepted broadly by all. Until today, we don't have people studying Rambam as a book of halakha. They go to Shulchan Aruch, which was written much later. And that is partly because Rambam says, I'm going to, my book of halakha is going to cover all the laws of the Torah, even those which are not practical today. So, about, you could say, 60% of his work is about laws that we don't keep today. The laws of purity, the laws of the red heifer, the temple, the Kohanim, etc., etc. And also he says, והיה נאות אצלי להפיל ממנו האריכות והסמיכות בזיכרון בעל הקבלה, עד שלא אומר דברי רבי פלוני, ולא רבי פלוני אומר כך וכך בכל מאמר. So I decided also to omit the names of all the chain of transmission, which is Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, in the name. He says this is too much. You're going to get lost in the details. Instead, I will give you a lineage, the history of all the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud. I'll give you all the names in each generation who are the most important scholars, and you'll know that whatever I say is from them. So he explains, is the first one to write such a clear introduction to a book of halakha, explaining his methodology and what he's going to do. That's why Maimonides is considered really one of the gigantic figures in the history of Am Yisrael. Someone once said that if we wouldn't know that Maimonides is a person, and they would quote Maimonides, you would have thought it's a university, because he produced so much material and it's so organized. Volumes upon volumes of halakha. He wrote also about medicine, philosophy. And he says, וכן ראיתי שלא חברהו בלשון ספרי הנבואה, לפי שהלשון הוא קצר בידינו משלים ענייני הדינים בו. So, he already decided he's going to write the book in Hebrew. The other books that he wrote, the commentary of the Mishnah, and his book of philosophy, Moreh Nevuchim, were written in Arabic. And then, he didn't even know, when he wrote it, that there are Jews who don't speak Arabic. It's the opposite of what people think today. When you tell someone today that some Jews speak Arabic, he says, wow, I didn't know that, that's amazing. For Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, when he wrote this book, naturally, everybody speaks Arabic. He didn't know that there are some Jews in Europe that don't understand Arabic. But after he wrote the book, the commentary on the Mishnah, and the Guide of the Perplexed, he got requests from Provence, from Germany. We need the book in Hebrew. So there were a family of translator, the Ibn Tibon family, and also the Kamhi family in Provence, who translated to Hebrew. So he decided that here he doesn't want things to be lost in translation. He's going to write it in Hebrew. He says, but not b'lishon sifrei nevuah, not in biblical language, because there are not enough words for all the legal terms. And he also decided not to choose Talmudic language. It's important to know that, because, as we mentioned before, today most people who study in the yeshivot, for them the Talmud is the central book that everybody has to learn. He says, and it would have been natural for Rambam to write his halachot in Talmudic language, right? He says, no. Why? לא אחברהו בלשון התלמוד, לפי שלא יבינו מאנשי אומתנו כי אם יחידים. Says only few people understand the language of the Talmud. It's not clearly understood. ומילות ממנו זרות וקשות אפילו לבקיאים בתלמוד. And there are many words that even people who know Talmud have problem with understanding their meaning, because, as we mentioned previously, they come from Greek, from Latin, from Persian, from other languages. אבל אחברהו בלשון המשנה כדי שיקל זה לרוב. So I will choose the language of the Mishnah. It's a very clear and fluent Hebrew, so it will be open for everyone. And he says, I will include in the book everything. עד שלא יחסר שום שאלה צריכה שלא אזכיריה. You will not find a question that will not be addressed in the book. That's truly ambitious. So he limits this. He says, או אזכור שורש תצא ממנו השאלה ההיא מהר מבלתי עיון דק. Says, if you don't find the exact question that you have, you will find the general rule that will allow you to arrive at the conclusion without in-depth analysis. So what he wants to do is to make Jewish law accessible to people. Ideally, according to Maimonides, you have his book. You need to know what to do. You open the book, you find the answer. That's it. You don't have to ask any rabbis. You don't have to get into complicated discussions. The answer is here. כי כוונתי בו גם כן הקיצור עם הקללות. קללות בכף, not curses, but general rules. And that is typical and important to the understanding the way Maimonides thinks. He says, in order for anyone to arrive at the conclusion, you cannot teach all the details of the law, because there are constant changes in circumstances, in events, in people's mentality. So instead, I'll teach you the general rules, as many rules as possible, and using these rules, you apply them, and you could arrive at the conclusion. And he says, I will include in it כל מה שימצא במשנה ותלמוד ספרה ספרי ותוספתא. Those are the books that we mentioned before, the Mishnah, the work of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Talmud, the commentary on it. Sifra v'sifrei are the Midrashei Halacha, the way they derive the Halacha from the text, and Tosefta is the Mishnah that was not included by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. V'chol ma she'otziu ha'geonim ha'mitaharim, and also all the generations that came after the Talmud, which in his time is about 700 years, I will include everything. So now, after that, I'm not going to read from the text, but he decided also on the structure of the book. How am I going to divide? What will be the structure of the book? So he made it similar to the Mishnah. Topics, but it's going to be thematic. Unlike the works that were written before him, were either anthologies on specific books, commentaries on specific books of the Talmud, or anthology on one topic only. But Rambam says, I'm going to cover everything. So what he did is this. He divided the whole material into 14 volumes. 14 volumes, that each one of them has a general topic. The first one is Mada. Mada in modern Hebrew is science. But in Rambam's Hebrew, it meant the knowledge of God. In Rambam's Hebrew, Mada is the knowledge of God. So in the book, for example, in the book that he calls Mada, he includes Ilchot Yesodei, that is broken into Yesodei Torah, the foundations of faith. Ilchot De'ot, laws of behavior, how a person should behave in everyday life. Avodat Kochavim, the understanding of idolatry, so you will know what to avoid. And the laws of Teshuvah, of repentance. All these are included. Those are subtitles within the book called Mada. Then he has a book called Ahava, love. And love is about our connection to God. So it includes tefillah, the laws of Kriyat Torah, the laws of tefillin, all the things that have to do with the service in the synagogue. Then he has a book called Zemanim, times, and that is about the calendar. So you have the laws of Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, Pesach. In that manner, he organized 14 titles, and those 14 titles are broken to smaller units. And each one of these, so we have the 14, the numerical value of the word 14 is yad. So of the number 14 equals the word yad, which means hand. So Mishneh Torah, the book that he wrote, is also referred to as Hayad HaZakah, the strong hand, meaning that it's a solid, important book. But also Hayad HaZakah She'er Asa Moshe Li'ani, it is related to Moshe Rabbeinu, because every time we speak about the miracles of the Exodus delivered by Moshe, we say the word Yad HaZakah. So it's the strong hand of Moshe ben Maimon. He called his book Mishneh Torah, sort of the repetition of the Torah, to say that is, or the second to the Torah. And what he suggested was, you don't need any other book. Take the Torah, and all the other hundreds of volumes that were written between the Torah and his time, he says you don't need them, put them aside, just go directly to my book, which of course created a lot of opposition. There were many opponents to Maimonides when he did that, but we'll get to it soon. So the work is divided, 14 books, many subtopics, and within each topic, which is called halachot, for example, Hilchot Teshuvah, it is broken into chapters, and the chapters into individual halachot. So this way, it's an easy reference. If you want to know where Maimonides said something, you'd say Sefer HaMadar, Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, the laws of beliefs or foundations of faith, chapter 2, unit 1. You have a very organized reference system, and it's easy also to memorize. And Maimonides, once he wrote it, it was completed between 1170 to 1180, meaning he was about between 40 and 50 years old. In 10 years, he finished that work, and immediately it spread all over the Jewish world. It was such phenomenal distribution. People loved the book.
The printing was done.
Right. So we know, but how was it spread? There was no printing. People copied it. That people said,
No Crown books?
what?
No Crown?
No Kindle, no Kindle.
Crown books. Crown books is from our area with these rich people
That they give you a okay.
family, right?
So, but people just copied the books. The greatest number of manuscripts of any work that exists in the Hebrew University is of Maimonides. People just copied it and to have a copy for themselves. They were willing to sit or to hire a scribe who will sit down and write for a couple of months and copy the whole book. But unfortunately, Maimonides, after he published the first edition, he had some corrections. Now, when you're like, how do you distribute the new edition? So, being that he was so meticulous and so organized, he went through the book and he made his corrections. But he wanted to make sure that this is something that was revealed only in the last 20, 30 years, because there are some contradictions, some difficulties with his writings, and some language is a little difficult to understand. So this is the work of Professor Rivlin and in Bar Ilan University, where he shows that what happened with the text. Maimonides sent the first edition, right? Now he has corrections. But he knows that thousands of people already have their copies. And he feels bad for them. He says, now you're going to erase whatever is written, and you're going to put the new text. It has to fit exactly where the old text was. He can't make it longer. So sometimes he had to twist his language to allow you, because there's this sense of aesthetics, that it has to be nice to make sure that the new text fits into where the old text was. And that created later a lot of problems in trying to figure out what exactly was his intention, because it was not as clear as the original language. And then after that he had the third edition. But the third edition there was no opportunity to spread it, to send it out. So it remained in the hands of the family, his son Rabbi Avraham and his grandson Rabbi David al-Nagid, and that's how it stayed. Now, next time, God willing, we'll talk about the opposition that Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon had, and that was part of the reason why it was not as broadly accepted later on as Shulchan Aruch. But